Welcome to Moneyballers, inside the college front office. We're your hosts, Nick Sisko and Luke Bogus, co-founders of Dropback. With the revenue-sharing era of college sports upon us, championship-caliber teams will be fueled by creative, competitive, collegiate front offices. Here on Moneyballers, we'll be learning from the brightest minds and emerging innovators in the new college front office, with the goal of equipping our listeners with tools and tips to give your teams a competitive edge.
Today's guest is Henry Davidson. Henry is Toledo's first ever assistant athletic director for student athlete benefits and data analytics. He joined in September of 2025, and his role is to infuse data and data decision-making into all units across the athletic department, from everywhere from fan engagement to operational efficiency. But this episode, we're talking about how he's implementing data systems and modeling into making better decisions about the acquisitions of players for not only football, but across the entire athletic department. As a caveat, this episode was recorded before the head coaching change of Candle and also Brian Gasser, the GM that we talked about a little bit in this episode. So he's actually, even since recording here, dived even further into infusing data into decision-making for the new roster that the football team has been building over this current offseason. So it's a great episode about how he is thinking, even at a G5 level, how you can punch above your weight using data and analytics to make more well-informed decisions to bring a competitive edge to Toledo. So this is a great conversation with Henry. Let's dive in. Henry Davidson, dude, thanks for coming on the podcast. How's it going?
It's great. Thank you for having me. Really excited to be here.
Always excited to talk to people who are in new roles in the emerging front office, but I think you have a really interesting career path that has led you to this point. You also have a very interesting title. I'm going to read it off. Assistant Athletic Director for Student Athlete Benefits and Data Analytics. Sounds really cool. What does it actually mean? Maybe walk me through, what was the job description like when you applied? What did Toledo bring you in to do?
Yeah, it's a very long title. I like to just refer to myself as the data guy on staff. That's the most simple way to kind of nail it down to just like a couple words without saying my full title. But basically the core thing is it's an intersection of scholarships and rev share and NIL. So it's, what does the total compensation package look like for student athletes at Toledo? How can we improve that? How are we making sure our athletes are compensated fairly while following NCAA rules and stuff like that? And then the data analytics portion, which is kind of cool, is getting away from the sport part. And it's more like ticket sales, revenue growth, operational efficiencies. So it bundles all that into one. So I spend probably half my time working with the sports on sports performance, player evaluation, scholarship allocation. And then my other half will be working with the revenue team, marketing team. How do we drive more engagement on campus? How do we sell more tickets? And how do we just become more efficient as a department in pretty much every area?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's no secret that Toledo is taking a lot of big steps to, make a dent in kind of this new environment. And one interesting thing that I really appreciate is that rather than just wrapping the former personnel office of the football team into a front office, like just retitling, I think like Toledo and the hiring of you makes an actual statement that hey, we're going to do things different in this new era. Not that maybe Toledo wasn't using data and analytics to make decisions beforehand. Walk me through what are some easy win projects that you've had in the first 6 weeks of being on the job. Clearly you can stay high level, but are there anything that's generally interesting that you've already dove in and been able to have an impact on in your first couple weeks?
Yeah, a lot of it is just we have the data, it's here, everything we need is available somewhere, but there was a need for a person to kind of centralize all that and then compile the data into dashboards or ways that people can see it and better understand it. So for example, I've already been working closely with the ticket operations team on how do we communicate with the AD and with the deputy ADs, what do ticket sales look like on a high level and on a granular level? What can we expect our attendance to be? How can we better forecast our attendance and things like that? So there's all sorts of areas where there's existing data, whether it's on the players, whether it's on our scholarships, whether it's on our social media platforms. I'm the guy that they go to say, okay, I have this information, make me understand it, make it visible, and have all of us be on the same page.
It's very crystal clear that teams and institutions that take a stance in saying that data needs to inform decision-making versus data just being there while we make decisions, those are two totally different things. Maybe historically, just generally in the space, us being in the space for a while too, at Dropback, it's to your point, the data is there. It's just, there hasn't been a lot of great workflows or people really to wrangle that data and use that data to inform decisions versus just reference the data after the fact. And so that's really cool. And I think that maybe brings up a question about how you maybe collaborate some of the people on the sports side. So you have your two different parts of your job. Maybe talk a little bit more about the sports aspect. What you didn't say you were is that you're not a general manager. That's because there is a general manager for Toledo football, Brian Gasser, and other sports, I'm sure. But like maybe walk me through like what are ways that you both collaborate and how does like you plus him actually make a front office versus the GM trying to do data stuff and maybe the data guy trying to do GM stuff? Like maybe walk me through like what you guys do separately versus like where you kind of come together.
Yeah, no, working with Gasser has been awesome. He's really, really good at what he does, really, really smart, and has been a huge resource for me. I've always been really interested in player personnel, and I've never completely had a grasp on what does a football general manager do at the college level. It's kind of different between universities, and so learning from him has been huge for me. Primarily, how I'm interacting with him on like a daily or a weekly level is he has an idea. He and Coach Candle have an idea of these are the areas we need to improve, and these are the type of guys that we want. How do we get those guys? How do we identify those guys? And then how do we make sure we have enough money available to properly compensate them? And in addition, how do we make sure that when we're having conversations with agents, we know what a realistic dollar amount looks like? Because there's some numbers floating out in the air that you may hear. A lot of it, in all honesty, isn't necessarily true. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes than you know. And so when you hear certain stories about guys getting X amount of dollars, there's so much more that goes into it. And so that side of things is handled more predominantly by Gasser. They are making the final decisions. They're signing the guys. They're going out watching the film. They're going to high school games, meeting with parents and the kids and stuff like that. I am more of a resource to say, okay, you know what kind of guys you want. Here are the numbers that show this guy matches what you want. I can provide him then with a list of and narrow down the portal or narrow down the number of athletes available to a more digestible list. And then from there, he could take the next steps of, okay, now we want to actually pursue this guy. Now we want to actually develop a relationship, see if the intangibles are there, work on the stuff that the numbers may not show. And so it's a really, really cool partnership of I take care of all the dirty work behind the scenes as far as numbers and figuring out athletic profiles on guys and how they'll fit into our scheme and how they've done in their past. And then he can actually take action on that, watch the film, meet with the players, and then say, okay, we're going to pull the trigger on this guy. This is a perfect fit. Numbers match, personality matches, money matches. Boom, we're good to go.
And I love how you explain that to show that it's really like a union of what coaches and GMs think and also what the data says. Not that what the coach says goes and what the data says goes. And I think that's like something that, is even representative in NBA and NFL front offices is like there's kind of like this decision-making triangle really is what I always like to reference it as is like one point of the triangle is what the coach thinks. So it's like watching film. He's tough. He's gritty. I like his speed. The second one is like what the market thinks. Like, yeah, what is the market demanding? To your point right now, what we hear about what the market's demanding is all hearsay. Fair market value and numbers that you see from different vendors that try to do it is always lagging behind because every year the market changes, which is crazy. So you can't rely on historical data. But, the market piece we're still kind of developing, but you can kind of get a sense of it by talking to agents and getting a feel for what people think. And the third part of the triangle is like has not existed in college sports ever because it really hasn't had to. But now with finite resources and finite roster limits, it has, and that's data. And so when you kind of compare what a coach thinks to what the market's maybe saying, it's like what our data is saying that helps you make a more educated decision. And what I really also appreciate is that like you're not just saying that, oh, we use data because everyone says that. Like you actually mean it. And I think what that means is that looking at your background, you come from a pretty non-traditional background compared to people in the space. Like you're in a new front office job, you have a really like nice fancy title, but usually that title is filled by either lawyers in this space or are personnel folks really who just like got a promotion. You came from a background of analytics has been your bread and butter. Maybe like walk me through that like translation between like data that you were doing at your former job to now the data you're doing for a front office at an athletic department. Like has that translation and the transition been smooth? Maybe like walk me through kind of how that journey's been to actually be like a real hardcore data person coming in to do a predominantly data-driven job.
Yeah, it's been a really unique transition for sure. Like there's a lot of things that overlap, but what I was doing before is completely different than what I'm doing now, just from like a results standpoint and what my daily life looks like. But what people may not realize is data exists everywhere and it can be used in similar ways across different disciplines. So I was doing data analytics for hotels and restaurants before, looking at how we can make more money and how we can be more efficient with our budget. And now I'm here doing relatively the same thing, but just for a different operation. So I think that skill set has translated very well and has allowed me to come in with a different point of view and say, hey, this is what I did before when I was analyzing some real estate and looking at revenue per square feet. A university, it exists as kind of like a piece of real estate. We have all this land. There's different ways that I could connect. I was working with labor analysis in the past, and there's overlap there with labor and salaries and things like that. So while it's definitely a risk, I would say, and I am forever indebted to our AD Brian Blair for taking the risk on hiring a guy like me with a background like mine, not coming from a personnel job or having a law degree. It's definitely a risk, but I think that this is the direction the sports world is moving. And if people want to be serious about, hey, we're using data, you're going to have guys that are experienced in coding and experienced in web development and things like that, because a coach might come to me and say, hey, I need a better way to look at players in the portal. And I have the ability to then, one, build a model to analyze the players, but two, put it in a visual that looks good and is easy to use. And so that background has been very beneficial to me so far, because it's something that's in high demand, but people don't know they need it until they have it, essentially. So that part has been really awesome for me. I feel like I'm in a place where I was meant to be always. So that transition has been really fun and really exciting. I will say the athletics world is definitely different as far as just the daily life, like that, the hours you may be working, the meetings you may have, like one day is not the same as the next. And my previous role was, I knew what I was doing. I was coming to work, I was working on my projects, and I was going home. This is every new day is bringing a new thing. And we got tons of sports going on right now. So whether that's how do we do in basketball last night? How many tickets did we sell? How much concessions did we sell? It's just, there's something new every single day. And so it's just data pouring in. And so having that one centralized source to exist as a way to look at all of it and spread it out to the people who need to see it to make those decisions and actually derive insights from it, I think is the real key with this position.
That's a great way to summarize it too. Again, going back to the notion of like, sure, we've had data in this space forever, but the translation of that data and then being able to present that data in a way that's consumable for people who actually need to make the decisions, like that being on your shoulders, while a tough one, it's a needed one, because again, it's using data to make decisions has never been more important in the world of finite resources and everything. So like maybe like what are some just generalized tips that you have for working with pretty technical concepts, technical outputs of all the, data that you're wrangling? Like what are some just generalized tips that you have for translating that to people who are maybe non-technical, or maybe just people like, like a standard, just a person in the athletic department or a general coach? Like, do you have any like tips that you lean on when you're like, they may or may not know the nitty gritty different parts about statistics, but here's how I kind of translate and make it more digestible? Like, do you have any just off the cuff tips?
Yeah, I like to just always think of like, what is the story that's being told here, and what's the start and what's the end point? A lot of the cases, they don't need to know every single thing that's happening between data and finished product. It's what are the results? I don't need to necessarily know exactly how you got there, but what is this telling me? So I think a big thing there is don't spend too much time in the details. And that's something I've had to learn. Is I'm a huge nerd. So like I could talk data all day. I could go in depth and be like, hey, I built this model and here are all the variables I put in. This is my thought behind why I chose this. This is why I chose that. But in athletics, the athletic director, deputy ADs, coaches, GMs, they don't have the time to hear every single thing of how I built it. So being confident in what I'm saying, making sure I'm telling a story, I think is the main piece. And what ties into that is just being open to listen, and feedback and criticism is just a good way to improve. Like I've already learned the different personalities here. I know what some coaches like and what some coaches don't like. I know when I'm meeting with certain people, like when they say 30 minutes, it's a 30-minute meeting and you better be damn ready for it, and you better not go 1 minute long or else you're out of time. So that's been really important, because you got both sides of the spectrum. When I meet with Gasser, we could talk for 2 hours and just nerd out over football, but that's not going to be the case when I meet with our AD. He's just going to ask me straight up, what is this model telling us, and what can we do with that information? Like Tell me, are we paying this guy too much or too little? Tell me, did we make the right call here or there? So it's just really being flexible and understanding who you're talking to. That's the main key. And just always be open to criticism and knowing that you're not going to be perfect. I have so much to learn. I've learned a ton while being here. I feel like I've aged at 10 years in 6 months mentally. So I think that's the main key. Just be open, talk to people, and just make sure to keep a smile on your face while you're doing it.
What is 6 months from now? Like you're 6 weeks in. What does 6 months from now look like? Clearly, in the next 6 months, you have 2 transfer portals coming up. Maybe so. Of course, executing on a lot of the models and stuff that you're building, I'm sure. But like maybe what are some other things that you would look back in 6 months and be curious to see how it went, or projects you plan to dive into? Yeah, what does the next look like?
Yeah, the main thing on the agenda right now, volleyball and football transfer portals are both coming up. So looking back at one, how well did our model stack up against what actually happened as far as like market value and things like that? And just were we able to get the guys or girls that we targeted in the portal? What did the success rate look like that? And then it's just moving on to the next because you just got to move forwards. Looking at next season's strategy, we already got to start planning for budgets then and think about, okay, we got some more incoming freshmen, make sure we got room on our roster for that scholarship wise, make sure there's no issues as far as payments going out. Main thing, it's just going to be looking back at what we did and what worked, what didn't work, and how can we be more efficient next year. For me, it's going to be very interesting because I started in October, portal's opening very soon. I didn't have a ton of time to flesh out really good models and like perfect pieces of art that I would like to put out. I'm very confident in what I've done, and I think we have fantastic tools available here, but I can only imagine what we'll be able to do with a full year of, okay, now we know the direction we're going. We know what we've done in the past. How can we tweak it? How can we make it even easier so that we're planning for the portal 6 months ahead as opposed to 2 months ahead? So that's the main thing for me. Get more established timelines and make sure that our processes are really drilled down and then hone in on what went wrong in this portal. How can we improve that? And then make sure next year we just do even better than this year.
Yeah, that's a great point too, that like you really can't judge the investments necessarily just this cycle, considering that, rev share just started in July. And so people are making new hires and trying new different approaches and new different things. You started in October. And so of course everyone wants the now result, but I think like you really won't see the outcome of who's going to dominate in the rev share era until 2, 3, 4 years from now, when you're actually seeing those bets that you're taking with data pay off. I mean, I think you see a lot of short-term wins, people doing a ton of the front loading, a ton of just, donor investments. And so it looks like they're dominating the rev share era because they have a ton of money to spend. But I think it's going to be those who spend the smartest, not the most, that'll, 3 to 5 years from now, those are investing in those infrastructure pieces and people, technology, et cetera. Now that'll pay off versus, the classic quote from Trev Alberts I always like to quote is, college sports doesn't have college sports doesn't have a revenue problem. They have an expenses problem. And so how do you actually optimize what you're spending and why is a big part of the future.
Yeah.
I know we kind of geeked out this episode, but maybe taking a step back, like you kind of mentioned you've aged 10 years in 6 weeks. What are some things you do to de-stress outside of the data and analytics world that you're living in?
Yeah, well, I still try and stay as in shape as possible. So lifting, running, playing a lot of basketball. Obviously, just a big sports fan in general. So any sporting event I can go to or watch on TV, I'm always doing that. And then I'm a singer, so I like to sing in my free time. I write songs, and
that's awesome.
Yeah, trying to stay on top of that. I'm trying to explore the city a little bit, getting used to being around Toledo. But yeah, it's been a whirlwind so far. My brain is full at all times, but I honestly wouldn't have it any other way. This is the stuff I enjoy doing in my free time anyway. So I think it's been a dream.
Well, I'm sure Toledo is happy to have you, and I know that they're lucky to have you. Any
Appreciate
final
that.
comments or notes, I guess, for the crowd before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I guess just one main thing with this is kind of what we talked about earlier. And everyone has the data, it's available, and it's just about putting the right pieces in place and being strategic with your operations. I've noticed it's almost like this panic around the new era of college football where people make quick decisions or quick reactions to the landscape, which in my opinion just isn't the way to handle it. Like hurrying up and hiring 4 extra personnel guys isn't going to be a long-term solution. Maybe hiring a data guy isn't the solution initially. It's just you really have to be strategic and really think through, okay, we got to take this and look long term and not just 1 year, okay, because a program could fall apart if you make too many mistakes in the first year. And I know college sports are not done changing. I know this isn't the end of rev share, NIL. I know there's going to be new rules and regulations and things are going to change. Transfer portal windows are going to change. We're seeing a ton of unique situations with coach buyouts and a lot of AD movements. So I think being calm, staying calm, not panicking, being strategic is the way to go. And that's the ultimate thing I've learned and I want people to take away in the athletics world.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think I respect the departments that are taking swings. And you mentioned that, hiring 4 personnel people might not be the solution, but at least it's an attempt to try to find a solution and get closer.
Exactly.
And running experiments and getting closer to what a solution could be. So I think those who are staying stagnant and what worked then will work in the future. I don't know if that'll pay out, but teams that are at least taking bets and trying new people and hiring new people and trying new systems are the ones that'll be really interesting to watch over the next few years.
Absolutely.
And clearly it'll be fun to watch what you and the Rockets do over the next few years as well. I really appreciate the time of the episode, and thanks, Henry. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a blast.
Awesome. Talk soon. Thanks for tuning in to Moneyballers. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Plus, leave us a review. And if you'd like to be a guest on the show, just email us at hello@dropback.com.